Courage takes many shapes. Sometimes courage is slaying the dragon, and sometimes it's merely picking up the sword and seeing yourself worthy of swinging it. Sometimes courage is running, sometimes it's walking, sometimes it's crawling. And as we navigate life's seasons and oscillating chapters, as we transform, so does courage, right alongside us. It's relative. And understanding that can not only change your life, it can save your life. I recently got in touch with an old buddy of mine from childhood, hadn't talked to in years at this point. And he's been going through a rough time. A series of unfortunate events, and because of that, fallen into a bad place. And he's just a top-tier dude. Huge personality, lights up every single room he walks into. And pretty quickly as we're talking, I could tell that it hurt him to walk me through, where he was and what he was going through. Almost as though there'd be some sort of judgment on my end. But see, here's the thing. No one is immune to succumbing from time to time to life's misfortune. That's just a reality. At any point in time, every single soul walking this planet is a few bad decisions away from rock bottom, just like they are a few good decisions away from the clarity and positive transformation and growth they've been looking for. And knowing that that's a fine line, to me, that's empowerment. Because it reminds us during the bad times we are, a few decisions away from climbing out. And during those good times that we're not infallible, that nothing should be taken for granted. No one is above misfortune. You're not less than for walking through your personal hell. It's merely your turn to find courage within yourself and rise above it. Now, that's exactly what he's doing, and this is ultimately my point. He's getting help. Hurt pride, hurt ego, angry at himself. He's rising above all of that to get help for the betterment of himself, his family, and his family's future. To me, it does not get more courageous than that. It's a courage I'm not even sure I fully can comprehend. And I get it, right? You're in the middle of the chaos. You don't see it. We never see clearly in the middle. Because it feels like he's digging himself out of a hole, so he doesn't see the magnitude of his decision. But given the season he's currently in, he is making himself the hero. And there will be a point a few years from now when, sure, courage will look different. Because what life asks of him at that point will be different. But we have to understand the moment. What's more courageous than saying, I don't want this anymore, I'm going to fix it, and taking a step towards that? And that's what we need to understand. I witnessed this firsthand. Especially in the, personal development world. I love consuming personal development on YouTube and podcasts and books and everywhere. And what I find is the message I need ebbs and flows depending on the season I'm in. Right? There are times, particularly in the first couple of years of starting this business, where I'd need the Gary V's and Eric Thomases of the world every day to say, dude, get off your ass and do more. Stop hiding behind your excuses. Be better. Right? And there are still days where I need exactly that. In those moments, courage for me meant overcoming the desire to cling to short-term fulfillment. Courage was doing what I needed to do, not what I wanted to do. Then there are times where, I'm fighting through something deeper, something personal. And courage looks a lot different. It's not go write 2 speeches and run 10 miles, go be better and do more. No, not that day. Those days, it's look in the mirror and remind yourself that what you do matters and that you are worthy. Courage is picking up the sword. It's when I dive into the philosophical. It's Eckhart Tolle explaining the power of being present. Jordan Peterson shedding light on what one's pursuit of meaning truly entails. Courage is recapturing my why, pushing through the fears and insecurities and feeling again like the person who can. And so the bottom line is, as I evolve, as I change, as life ebbs and flows, courage changes with me. And sometimes the smaller action in a particular situation is much more powerful, much more meaningful than a big action taken when, things are going well and the stars are aligned and life is smooth. Perfect example, something that almost always chokes me up, and I'm not exaggerating, seeing someone who's overweight and you can kind of tell they're struggling through jogging on the side of the road, right? Because I know how insanely hard that is to begin a journey of that magnitude. To look at one's life and say, hey, I'm changing the situation, right? To lace up your shoes and suffer through a run outside or even a walk outside. Think about how powerful that statement, how much it took, how much fear and insecurity was pushed aside in the pursuit of something better. Now imagine what would be missed. Imagine what a loss. They didn't celebrate that victory, their strength in stepping outside that day. Why? Well, because their neighbor ran 10 miles. They only ran 1. But that's the thing about courage. It doesn't look the same. Who cares what the neighbor did? Do you understand what just happened? His courage to push through a 10-mile run is astronomically different than your courage to shift your identity, to transform into someone who runs. Again, there will be a point in time when what courage means for you changes, but understand the now. Celebrate this in how remarkable your action in this moment. And I hope I'm able to communicate the variance there, right? Like sometimes courage is finding a way through, the fire in your lungs and pain in your legs to get your split from 6 minutes a mile to 5 minutes and 45 seconds. And that's amazing. Sometimes courage is getting out of bed. It depends on where you are and what life is giving you. And I promise you, it's not an excuse to do less. Everyone wants to grow in some capacity. I know I sure do. This isn't a cop-out, and I don't think anyone listening wants to be patted on the head and told, hey, you're wonderful just the way you are. Don't change. No, the meaning is in the evolution. What I'm saying is, I've seen in others, some close to me, and I've certainly experienced in myself that misunderstanding what courage means in a given moment ends up hurting more than it helps. It creates and highlights a gap where a gain should be. Courage has many shapes. It will transform around you all your life. So take the time to understand where you are. Take the time to explore what the next steps look like. And give yourself grace, give yourself appreciation for taking the required steps. Courage is not measured by what you want to do 3 years from now. It's not measured by what your neighbor's doing. It's not measured by 40 steps down the road. Courage is finding it within yourself to do the most important thing in your life now. At night, the sky becomes visible. The darkness, the muting out of everything else allows the stars to finally shine through, to make their presence known. And during the day, conversely, one cannot see those stars, but the world around him on the ground becomes illuminated. It's a push and pull that seems to work perfectly. And I think there's something poetic about the partnership existing between the big picture goal and the small steps required to bring it to life. As one of my favorite sayings goes, keeping your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. Because here's what's interesting. If one were to only look up at the goal, she'd be consistently reminding herself of the ideal without taking the necessary steps to get there. And if one were to only look down at her feet, well, her steps would eventually become aimless. And it's that duality, right? The need to both reassure yourself you can see the stars, as well as use the world around you to pull yourself closer to them, that changes things. Right? It's that beautiful dance that has to be maintained. And this is a balancing act that has certainly been challenging. Sometimes the pendulum swings way too far one way, sometimes way too far the other. But in a perfect world, you want it gravitating towards the center. I remember just starting the YouTube channel almost a decade ago, having, big multi-million subscriber goals, but completely lacking the systems and everyday practices in place that would walk me towards that finish line. Sure, something's better than nothing. I was working and learning, but the actions simply didn't align with the objective. I had to correct them. And then I've been on the other end as well. Right? I'd be doing things every day without knowing why. All steps, no goal. That sort of thing occurs when routine takes on a life of its own. You start doing things because, it's what I do. It's what I've always done. And, this is when one has to look in the mirror and ask the difficult questions. And look, anytime I can squeeze the complexities down into the simple, I try and do that. So with that in mind, my questioning goes like this. What do you want? Know the answer? Okay, good. Next question. Is what you're doing taking you closer every day to what you want? Asking that question in a serious way takes a spotlight to one's world. Using my previous metaphor, it shuts the lights off so the North Star becomes visible. And then, turns them back on to ask yourself if you're using your resources to move there. And I've become pretty good at asking myself this question consistently, and still I find things that don't belong. That sort of, they hide in plain view. I have faith that I'll end up exactly where I need to be. But that faith is rooted in my commitment to continually assess, to scrutinize, and adjust. There's very little hope and a substantial amount of trust in my ability to continue forward. There's an idea referred to as the Stockdale paradox, which states, and this is the first definition I grabbed from Google here, you must never confuse faith that you'll prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. That's where the tough love thing comes in. Be your biggest fan because no one will believe in you unless you do. It all starts with your trust in yourself to navigate the process and arrive where you must arrive. But it also requires you are your biggest critic. It means the reason you trust yourself to get there is because you know you won't just sit back and say, I'll win because I believe I'll win. No, you'll win because you will, while having your head in the clouds, be brutally pragmatic with the steps you're taking on the ground. You'll win because you're committed to learning and adjusting. One of my favorite epiphanies when I started doing this full time was the realization, at a very small scale at first, that, whoa, someone can't fail unless they quit. You can't lose unless you stop. Impossible, someone might think, right? Well, no, because when you miss the mark or you fall short, you take a second to understand why, and then you come back to the problem or challenge again, right? This means life is a game of tenacity, of persistence, of commitment. The one who keeps adjusting and coming back is bound to connect the dots eventually, which makes failure the simple decision that, this isn't worth it for me. I don't want to continue adjusting and re-engaging with this. And look, hey, depending on the situation, that may be the move, right? There have been things in my life where after sufficient trial and error, sufficient data, I've said, this doesn't align with who I am or what I want. I'm going to walk away and pivot to something that does, right? But the key is knowing that it is a decision. To not reach a particular goal is a choice to no longer attack it relentlessly. And so when you feel lost or defeated or even frustrated with the process, try that line of questioning. What do I want? And is what I'm doing today bringing me there? This allows you to start taking a sledgehammer to the things that don't belong, refining the process. And sometimes walking away from the things that are no longer in the scope of who you want to be and where you're going. But the power is in knowing, it's in understanding that your footsteps, the little actions of your day-to-day, they are incredibly powerful. But most of all, when you are methodical with them, when they're pointed in the right direction. So pick your stars carefully and own those steps that take you towards them. Failure is not a sickness you catch. It doesn't fall on your head like a piano in those old cartoons. It's a choice. Meaning, in positive terms, as long as you are committed to learn, reapproach, and repeat, you will find yourself atop the mountain. As long as you're willing to evolve, you will ultimately arrive. If you have the ability to love yourself first. Charles Bukowski. So last week I was in Utah, and while I was there I did some guided breath work, which I'd never done before, and honestly was a little skeptical at first. But I try and keep an open mind and gave it a shot. I'm happy I did. It ended up potentially being one of the most important things I've ever done. And I want to share why. Because this breakthrough or aha moment, if you will, was exactly what I needed when I needed to hear it. So this episode's going to be a little different than usual, but I feel compelled to pass it along. So to set the scene, I arrived with a friend of mine to the instructor, Jen's location. She gave us an overview, kind of explaining what the next hour is going to look like, and handed me a notebook to write down my goal for the session. And the notebook becomes pretty important as the story goes on. But I opened it and I wrote what I'd like to use this session to reflect on. It happened to be the walls that I have a tendency to build around myself, right? That day, that felt like the most pertinent obstacle in my life. I saw it as an opportunity to push back against that reality that human beings love to create normal and then latch on to it. And that's not ideal, because when we do that, we stop looking for places to grow. We stop pushing. We stop seeking to live life to the fullest. In other words, we settle. And so I wrote that down. I closed the notebook, laid back on this incredible fuzzy blanket, and the music got turned on. We began the breathing pattern. In, out. In, out. Jen started guiding us, verbally taking us back to a conversation with our younger selves. The journey had begun. And this is the part where things get really interesting, because my thoughts really did feel like some strange mix of dreaming and hallucinating, just from breath work. But at some point, she referenced the need to let go and said the words, we weren't meant to suffer or hold on to suffering. And that really cut deep, because I know there are so many places where I've rationalized continuous suffering in my life. I'd speculate that in some way, we all do. When the hard thing or the uncomfortable thing, when they stop being stepping stones and instead just become the way things are, becomes a concession. Hey, this doesn't feel good, but it's my life. This person holds me down, but it's how things are. I don't like doing this every day. It eats at me, but hey, life, am I right? That's learned helplessness. It hides in the corners and the nooks and crannies of life, subtle enough that we don't give it much thought. And I imagined very vividly climbing down a ladder placed on the edge of this dark canyon that went straight down. Down, down, down. Everything, my entire landscape was black and white. There was zero color, except for the rays of light barely visible at the bottom. All the way down as I descended into the canyon. The colors, they'd get a little stronger, a little brighter, as if every step put a little more vibrance into my life. Each move down made things a little clearer, the ladder becoming quicker and quicker, eventually turning into a slide that brought me down to the base of the canyon, where upon landing and standing up, everything was illuminated. Fields of sunflowers, waterfalls, birds chirping, the sun shining, and it was there in that moment I realized my intention for the class, the one I wrote down in that little notebook, well, it missed the mark. Not in the sense of being incorrect or wrong necessarily, but it simply wasn't enough. See, at the root of it all, or at the bottom of that canyon, existed life with the courage to love yourself. Not just accept yourself, not just be okay with your existence, but love yourself. With all your faults and your struggle, with all your mistakes and your history, it became clear to me how much changes when you love with all your heart the person staring back at you in the mirror. The opinions of others, they do not guide your decision-making. How could they? How could others know you better than you? In fact, those opinions are part of the black and white landscape to be left behind at the top of the mountain. The consistent suffering you've become accustomed to, the learned helplessness you endure, that's not acceptable to someone who truly loves him or herself. Loving yourself means pushing away that which is not you. It's finding that ladder down to the beautiful world of authenticity and truth, the magic of being aligned with what really matters. And what's funny is, I can talk about breaking down barriers. They should be broken down. I can talk about stepping into fear because it should be confronted. I can talk about finding a way out when we're stuck and a way up when we're down. I can talk about all of that every day of my life. But none of it matters if you don't learn to fully love the reflection in the mirror more than you ever thought you could. Think about the gift you could give to that younger version of yourself. Think about what you could give to those close to you, your family, your friends. Think about what you could do for the world if you left those black and white concessions behind you and lived a life true to yourself. It is, of course, not always easy, but I learned that day that it is the North Star. It's what we build upon. So before we ask how to shape the world around us, maybe we should be asking, how do we embrace the one within us? Maybe we should learn to love ourselves so deeply that those walls don't need to be broken down. Because in time, we'll learn not to build them up in the first place. We'll learn that in a world of black and white, it is acceptance and trust and confidence and love that gives it color.